And the whole idea here is that the process of keto adaptation could have a lot of benefits for athletes. That's why I'm here today to sort of make that point. So one obvious point that we've already talked about, hitting the wall, is a fuel crisis in your brain. You know, it's running out of fuel, glucose. So keto adaptation, as I said, makes you bonk-proof because you've got almost an infinite supply of fuel now by way of ketones to fuel the brain. And as the gentleman mentioned, and countless other athletes who we've put on low-carbohydrate diets have articulated the same type of sensation. They don't hit the wall. They are sort of impervious to that phenomenon, which is so common when athletes are focusing on carbohydrates. The other point is that athletes who are consuming a lot of carbohydrates are also generating a lot of reactive oxygen species. And we know that burning fat is more efficient. It's associated with less generation of these free radicals. And the primary target of these free radicals are membranes, highly unsaturated fatty acids in membranes. And that's related to insulin sensitivity. So better protection of these highly unsaturated fatty acids like EPA, DHA, arachidonic acid actually preserves cellular function and insulin sensitivity, which is important in recovery. There's evidence that ketones are protein sparing. So there's perhaps an anti-proteolytic effect of ketogenic diets. Decreased central fatigue, I won't go into the sort of biochemistry behind that, but there are mechanisms of fatigue related to increases in serotonin in the brain with prolonged exercise. And low-carbohydrate diets actually increase branched-chain amino acids in the blood, which compete for tryptophan transport, which is a precursor for serotonin. So we often hear about less central fatigue. Because you're not burning as much carbs and glycogen, which is the precursors for lactate, there's less lactate and hydrogen ion generation. Also less ventilatory drive due to the lower RQ associated with being in a ketogenic state. And the improved body composition that goes along with it over time is even relevant for power and strength athletes who benefit from a higher power to mass ratio. So a little bit more on ketones here. You know, we talked about this concept of nutritional ketosis, which in my mind really starts at about 0.5 millimolar. If you're eating any amount of carbohydrate, you're probably closer to 0.1 or 0.2. And then beyond that, you know, anywhere up to maybe 3 millimolar, you know, is an ideal range for being in this sort of ketone zone or this ideal, you know, state of nutritional ketosis to fuel the brain during exercise. And then, you know, you all know ketoacidosis is a whole other animal. That's when you're above 10 millimolar, and that just doesn't happen in a healthy person who's not diabetic. So this is Steve's study he did, at least published in 1983, where he took a group of very high-level cyclists. These guys had very high VO2 maxes, adapted them over a 4-week period to a ketogenic diet. And you can see each line here is an athlete. At the time, you know, the thought was you take carbohydrates away from these cyclists, their performance is going to go in the tank. Yet he actually showed no change in performance, but you see dramatic difference in their RQs. If you're burning exclusively fat, you know, you have an RQ of 0.7. So 0.72 there indicates these guys were performing exercise, and the level of exercise they were doing, they were burning almost 1,000 kilocalories per hour. So these guys were not recreational athletes. Steve took biopsies, measured glycogen. You could see before the ketogenic diet, they had, you know, high glycogen as you'd expect, and that depleted over the course of 2 hours of exercise. But when they did the same exercise, keto adapted, notice that glycogen wasn't totally depleted. It actually was about 50%, but the slope is much less. So there's tremendous glycogen sparing going on because they're burning fat. So this is the conventional view of peak fat burning, and I just want to get through this because this is kind of the, I think, really interesting and fascinating work that has gone underappreciated. This is the conventional view of, you know, how you would measure somebody's ability to burn fat. If you do a submaximal exercise test and measure fat oxidation, you tend to get a curve like this. So somewhere around 60%, give or take, depending if it's trained or untrained, 60% of somebody's maximal oxygen consumption, that's where they peak out in terms of the number of grams of fat they can burn per minute or per hour. And once you start to exercise harder, yeah, you're burning more calories, but you're burning mainly carbohydrate. So let me go back to Steve's study here. I'm sorry, before I do that, this is probably the largest, most accepted study done looking at a large group of athletes and their peak fat burning. Actually, there's sedentary and athletes in this group of over 300 people. So the group average in peak fat burning during exercise is 28 grams per hour. And just to give you the range there, the highest person in that group, which is an elite athlete, was 60 grams per minute. So that's largely considered the fat burning ceiling. Here's the data from Steve's study. The average was 90, 1.5 times the highest person that was in the other group, and they're consuming carbs. A couple of the athletes were burning close to 2 grams of fat per minute, so almost 120 grams per hour. So we've shattered what was largely considered the peak fat burning ceiling by adapting an athlete to a very low carbohydrate diet. And just finally, I think this is my last slide. I've been interested and personally been involved more with resistance training. So we've done similar work with athletes participating in resistance training. And this is just one variable we've looked at. This is the percent change in body fat. The first two groups there are diet-only groups, so low carb versus low fat. These are very well-controlled diet studies. And we see greater reductions in percent body fat with low carb versus low fat. No big surprise. But the two other groups performed 12 weeks of very high-intensity resistance training, progressive resistance training. And resistance training in general helps whether you're following low fat or low carb in terms of body composition. But the best results are achieved with the combination of low carb and resistance training. It's all like an additive effect. Low carb is really great at burning the fat off, and then you add the stimulus of resistance training to low carb, and that helps protect the lean tissue or even increase lean tissue. And if I cherry pick the best responders out of that fourth group there, the low carb resistance training group, this is their individual changes in body composition. So Fred, asked you, can you convert fat to muscle or vice versa? And of course, not at the cellular level. But the question that I would ask is, can people simultaneously lose fat and gain lean tissue? So a lot of my colleagues say, no, that's not possible. You can't be in a catabolic mode in your fat cells and an anabolic mode in your muscle cells. But here's the data. This is from DEXA, so gold standard in body composition. These are 4 athletes in that resistance training low carb group, lost 20 to 30 pounds of fat in 12 weeks. So that's pretty impressive. I mean, not unbelievable, but I mean, that's pretty darn good. But what I found really astounding is this is their simultaneous changes in lean body mass. So it's not an anomaly here with one subject driving the mean. This is a common response. It's physiologically possible. We were not using steroids or any other. This was a low carb diet with a pretty standard resistance training program that was supervised. I won't talk about this so we don't go too far over time, but there are athletes out there. They're not always open. I think there's a lot of closet low-carb athletes, but there are a few. Marty Fish is notably one who's attributed a lot of his success. He's the #1 ranked U.S. tennis player. Lindsey Vonn, an Olympic skier, and arguably the best athletes on the planet are these racing sled dogs. And they burn fat. That's what they burn. That's how they win the Iditarod races. They're burning fat. So you can read through my summary, and I'm happy to talk with you all after after the lecture here. Thank you, Jimmy.
Thank you, Dr. Volek.
2 years ago, I released this book, The Mouthtrap, The Butt Stops Here. And since then, I've been a year on a low-carb diet, and I've changed the book. I have a new edition. I don't have to tell you there's a problem with what we've been eating. It's everywhere. You can see the obesity. You hear all the time of people being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, chronic this and chronic that. And I've done a lot of research. I've attended lectures. For a year, I've just been studying this. The first book told you how to mind whatever diet you chose. And this book tells you how to mind a low-carb diet. And it helps you go through a whole year of changing your life. This book will really help you. It'll help you mind the lifestyle. There's more and more evidence that carbohydrates are the culprit here. And mostly it's about sugar. We don't want to give up sugar, but I can make it so easy for you. And the Mouthtrap, The Butt Stops Here, the low-carb version, is going to help you do that. I hope my book can help a younger generation, because you don't need to wait till you're my age to change your life. And I feel cheated that I didn't know the truth, and now I know the truth, and it's in my book. When you read the book, you'll find out that I should weigh 288 pounds right now, but I've been on a low-carb diet for a year and 2 months, and I weigh 135. But if I followed calories in, calories out, I would weigh 288. One of the most exciting things for me is this book is available as a book. So you can get it as an e-book, an audio book, or a real book.